promoting their expertise and research to the media and on platforms such as this. Tonight, I am virtually sitting down with three of our experts, Emmanuel Jean-Francois, who's a comparative and international education professor in the Patton College of Education, Nukhet Sandal, political science professor in the College of Arts and Sciences, and Mario Grijalva, a tropical disease professor in the Heritage College of Osteopathic Medicine. So welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining me and taking the time out to talk and answer these extremely relevant and burning questions that people on the internet seem to have. Tonight for our viewers, we will specifically be talking about other countries' view on America's current election in terms of being concerned with their own country's relationship to the United States. So before we go ahead and get started into that conversation, I'd like to learn a little bit more about each of you and your background. So if you could each tell us a little bit about yourself and how your expertise in regards to this topic would be really great. Emmanuel, if you want to go ahead and start, that'd be awesome.
Yes, thank you very much, Samantha, for having me. And I am pleased to share the panel with my two colleagues, Mario and Nukhet. I'm Emmanuel Jean-Francois. As you mentioned, I am an associate professor in comparative and international educational leadership in the Patton College. I'm originally from Haiti, but being involved in comparative and international education means that not only I teach, I do research, and also I travel as a result in various parts of the world, Europe, Asia, especially Southeast Asia, Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, where I'm from. So I'm very pleased to participate in that panel because I'm kind of a little political junkie in the sense that I grew up in a household. My dad was the mayor of my native city, so I grew up in a political environment, so to speak. So I never miss an opportunity to see what people think about the U.S. Whenever I travel. And I can tell you that I have heard a lot. So I'll be more than happy to share some of the things that I've heard and also some of the things that I learned through my transnational, international, and global interactions. And thank you again for having me.
No, thank you. And we're glad to have you, especially, with all of that information you just provided us. Your perspectives and expertise are going to be a great addition to this conversation. Nukhet, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. My name is Nukhet Sandal, and I'm a professor of political science. I am originally from Turkey. I came to the United States, I think, 18 years ago, and I did my PhD at University of Southern California. My dissertation was on the Troubles period in Northern Ireland and the role of religious leaders in conflict transformation. I worked at Brown University for 3 years, and then I joined Ohio University 7 years ago. I am working on divided societies, politics of divided societies, conflict resolution, Middle East politics, and foreign policy analysis nowadays. And at Ohio University, I am teaching classes on international relations, national security, terrorism, and Middle East politics. And I look forward to our conversation.
Great. Thank you so much. And certainly last, but certainly not least, Mario, if you could go ahead and introduce yourself.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to participate. And I feel that I'm the oddball out in this conversation since I am a biologist by training. And I am originally from Ecuador. I've been in the United States for about 28 or 29 years and a faculty at Ohio University for about 21 years. And my expertise is in tropical diseases, particularly tropical diseases in Latin America. So through that research that research line, I have been able to travel quite a bit. Again, I'm a member of several international research networks, and the issue and the intersection of politics and science is quite important. And we are seeing that right now in in the world, and all the pandemic that is, all what the pandemic is bringing to us. So I'm really happy to be here and looking forward to continue this conversation.
Great. Well, thank you all so much again. It is really great hearing about your backgrounds and how you're positioned to talk, on this big scale about the United States relationship in different policies, and especially our relationship with other countries, especially in the midst of this election. So now for you viewers, I'd like to give a reminder that if you have a question regarding tonight's topic, please feel free to message us on one of our Ohio University social media accounts, or feel free to comment on the live stream. We will do our absolute best to get to all of your questions tonight and have these wonderful experts answer them. But unfortunately, if we can't get to them, please do not feel like we will not answer them, because we will send those questions directly to them to answer and get back to you as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get our conversation started. All right, so this first question is actually kind of for all of you to answer, but if you, Emmanuel, want to kind of take the first stab at answering it, that would be great. So right now, there's been a lot of, things on the internet about other countries' thoughts about the United States with everything going on. How does the world see the United States today?
Well, thank you very much. This is a very interesting question, and as I mentioned earlier, I travel quite a lot, and I talk to people, I observe people, and one thing that is interesting is that people outside of the United States, they watch the news about what is going on here. You will be surprised if you travel to see how much people know about national politics and local politics in the United States. So there are two things that usually come when I talk to people about what they think of the United States. The first one is that the hypocrisy of the United States. They talk about that a lot. And also over the past 4 years, they talk about the evaporation of U.S. global leadership with the slogan of America First. But if I, touch on the first one, I had some of these conversations with people. They say that we did not believe that the United States could elect Barack Obama, and they did not believe that he was a reflection of the country. And I said, well, that's one way to look at it, but they elected him anyway. And when 2016 happened, it was kind of a consensus. That was kind of a retaliation against the election of Barack Obama. And they said that is the real America. And when you go into this conversation, you have that Q&A, you ask question. And I remember vividly, somebody said that, Emmanuel, Americans knew who Donald Trump was. He became president anyway. And I said, okay, then what? They say, well, and they watch pundits, people commenting, in the United States, they say, well, when the Billy Bush tape happened, they say, well, women are not going to vote for that guy, especially because he's running against another woman. Well, when after the election, it turns out that the majority of white women voted for Donald Trump. And they said, well, America is, there is a moral majority with the evangelical people. I grew up in the church. My dad was a Baptist minister, so I know what they are talking about. And I said, well, this time it will be different, because they remember what happened on Bill Clinton and how, the moral majority, they went after him, they crucified him, literally. But guess what? The evangelicals, they voted in mass for Donald Trump. It's like, and it's funny, somebody said they have the Bible in one hand and the Trump ballot on the other hand, and voting for him. So, and people look at the folks who are very passionate about the Make America Great Again. And if you have any sociology, you make any sociological observation, it tells you that the people who are the most passionate about him are the ones who suffer the most from his policies if he was successful at implementing most of them. So what it came about, people said, it's not about the economy. I said, people vote their economic interests. They said, no, it's not about the economy. It's not, it's about something else. There is more of the American cultural identity. And there are some people who came to the realization that the America that they knew is disappearing. And you know, in Germany, in Hungary, I met some young folks who are in the street organizing in organizations similar to what we call the white supremacist groups here.
Mm-hmm.
And when I started to have conversation with them, there is a name that came over and over. It's a guy, it's a French author. His name is Renaud Camus. He wrote a book in French. The title of the book is Le Grand Remplacement. The translation in English will be The Great Replacement.
Mm-hmm.
And he has a theory where he explains that the global and liberal elites of the world, and that he called the replacists, he said that they have an agenda through policies to replace the white Europeans with non-European people from Arab countries, from the Middle East, from Africa, etc. And so therefore, he believes that immigration is a threat to European civilizations. And he believes that these policies are being implemented through organizations such as the European Union, NATO, and so that's how you see a lot of these organizations. They are against the European Union, they are against immigrants. But guess what? In 2016, this movement that existed before, they found a voice when that somebody who shares some of these views are elected as president of the United States. So the notion of America first was not invented, you know, by the current president, because in Finland there is Finnish first, in England there is Britain first, in Denmark there is Danish first, in Germany you have Alternative for Germany, you have UK Independent Party. All of these organizations, they share that same view that the immigrants are the problem. Even during the pandemic recently, there were protests in Germany against the lockdown, and their first target, they said that, well, COVID-19 came to Germany because of the immigrants. So they blame it on them anyway. So this is that's usually this is the perception that people have about the United States with respect to policies and the election. But also there is a constant that nowadays people think that they cannot count on the U.S. global leadership, especially the smaller countries who are sometimes being bullied by other, you know, bigger countries. And in the past, they will count on the United States to say, stop the abuse of human rights, stop the abuse of, you know, women's rights, stop the abuse of children. But when they watch the TV, they see that right now we have 455 kids who are separated from their parents, and the U.S. Department of Homeland Security cannot reconnect these kids with their parents. So they say, well, the U.S. has lost its moral ground to tell them, do not, you know, shoot lacrimogene, you know, chemical gas on protesters, because it's been happening here as well. Do not intimidate people who are voting, because this is happening here as well. Do not threat your political opponents to put them in jail, because it's happening here as well. So these are some of the perceptions that I heard. But at the same time, it's not entirely negative. There is a positive perception by individuals outside of the United States also, because they see, they watch history, they think that it's a roller coaster, they think that that's a cycle, and then it may change later on, etc. This is why people still go to take the lines in front of the American consulate to get a visa to visit the United States. Students are still coming to study in U.S. universities that are among some of the best universities in the world, etc. So it's a mixed perception, and you can later on I can talk about the leaders also, how they perceive the United States, because the perception of the general population of countries outside of the U.S. sometimes can be different from the perceptions of people who are in political power. So I don't want to go further, so let me stop here for my colleagues to chip in.
Yeah, thank you. That was great insight, and you really gave us a full explanation of how other countries are viewing us, as well as kind of a little bit of information about other countries itself. So that's much appreciated to kind of give us a good ground to step off of on this conversation. So Nukhet or Mario, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I think that Emmanuel has done a very comprehensive general view of what is going on. My perspective comes a little bit more focused into Latin America. And in order to understand the context of Latin America, we need to take into consideration that there is a colonial past, and there is a lot of still scars from the different dictatorships and juntas that were present in the 80s and so on. There was a lot of repression that eventually led to polarization of the political system in the countries. So Latin America is not homogeneous, right? It's a collection of countries, and there are particularities to every political system. Now, thanks to Professor Matthew Layton from the Political Science Department at Ohio University, I was able to look at some data from the Latin American Public Opinion Project, or LAPOP. And so I'm going to share one or two slides on this that shows this opinion about perceptions of the United States. And you can see how and this is, 100% would be 1, right? Mm-hmm. So this is a percentage positive opinion. So it goes from in the 2012, a positive opinion, and sort of maintaining 2014. And you see this decline to the 2016, 2017, and further erosion of that into the 1819 cycle. Whereas by comparison, the perception of the public of China stays relatively stable, right? It doesn't improve really, but now we have a situation where there is flip-flop in the perceptions between these two countries. And of course, this perception is varies with the different countries. Here is the same type of scale, and you see that in Bolivia the perception is very negative. From the bottom up, in Bolivia, Mexico, Uruguay, Jamaica, Chile, Guatemala, sort of the middle pack here. You see Brazil, which is about 4 point something, and a more favorable opinion towards the United States in Dominican Republic, on Paraguay and Panama. And so that is some very interesting way to look at this and to see this erosion that has happened. Now, what Emmanuel was referring to in terms of the issues surrounding immigration is really important in Latin American countries. To have a president that refers to anybody that lives south of the Rio Grande as generic Mexicans, and to start talking about people from Latin backgrounds as rapist and negative type of things is something that reverberates throughout the society, and that is not a really good thing, right? It really demonstrates this erosion that happens in the confidence of the public in the American system that put the current administration in power. Now, the flip side of that is a situation that happened in Brazil. In Brazil, you have a president that is, they call it the Latin American Trump. Mr. Bolsonaro, is basically running the same type of things and the same type of strategies that are president in the United States. So that is something that is very problematic, because there is this game of public opinion and the uncertainty that happens surrounding the issue of fake news and the issue of anti-science and the issue of doubting climate change and all of those connotations. And perhaps Nukhet can comment further in about this issue.
All right. Well, my colleagues have done an amazing job, so there's not much for me to cover except my regions of expertise, maybe following from Mario's Latin America brief. So one thing before I touch upon a couple of important issues is, until Trump administration, when we were teaching foreign policy, we used to say that there's not much difference between Democrat or Republican foreign policies. I mean, you have a certain trajectory and certain strategy. It's relatively boring. So when election time comes, you would have maybe minor differences, but it wouldn't be anything major. With the Trump administration, the tenets of American foreign policy has been challenged in multiple ways. I mean, as Emmanuel mentioned, there is this America First nationalism and a very personal style. That's not the discourse is not through institutions anymore. It is President Trump's personal, bold expressions, usually not expected, inconsistent. So it is, you don't know what the next step will be. And most importantly, from my point of view, if I wear my foreign policy hat, is the challenging of the really close, important alliances. And NATO, for example, is the major alliance that was challenged. Yes, there were questions, of course, post-Cold War, what is next for NATO? But with President Trump, this challenge has become really vocal. He has said in many circumstances, in many speeches, whether we still need NATO and Europe should pull its own defense burdens and US should not be responsible for those, which led to a concern in Western European countries like Germany and France. And when we look at the public opinion surveys in those countries in Western Europe, we see that there is Europeans do not approve of Trump by big margin. And President Emmanuel Macron recently said, I mean, they try not to endorse any candidate openly, but they said that, Macron said that, well, I hope US will change its course very soon. So there is this desire definitely for a more internationalist, more traditional US president who support NATO unequivocally. So in that sense, European public opinion has been predominantly against the administration. Having said that, again, like Mario brought up Bolsonaro, there are leaders that Trump famously got along or made things work, right? I mean, from my region, you can give Erdogan as an example. I mean, the US-Turkish relationship is not exactly at its peak nowadays. But Turkey has done some questionable things during Trump administration, like buying S-400 defense systems from Russia, or going into northern Syria to fight against the Kurds. And surprisingly, the Trump administration was pretty tolerant about these actions. And in a couple of instances, President Trump actually said that they get along really well. Similarly, Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel and Trump struck a chord. And as we have seen, Trump recognized Israeli sovereignty in Jerusalem, and unequivocally supported all Netanyahu's intentions and ambitions, which some Israelis appreciated because they have never had this level of unconditional support. And some, of course, for some more liberal Israelis on the left and for Palestinians, that was kind of a disaster. And then finally, you look at the US-Saudi relations. We had the murder of the Washington Post columnist Jamal Khashoggi under very controversial terms. And to our surprise, again, there were no significant consequences for Saudi Arabia. To the contrary, the relationship is great. The arms sales are going on. So the incident, which again, like we should have been investigated more fully, I hate to say, but almost have been forgotten. So there are some relationships that are special. I'm not even right now going into the US-Russia, or like I shouldn't say US-Russia, like Trump-Putin relationship, which complicates things. But, and I want to also emphasize the fact that a political leader supports a Trump administration does not necessarily mean that the people of that country support the administration. Those are very different terms, especially when you are looking at regions like, yes, Latin America, regions like Middle East. So in that sense, we have to distinguish between the leaders and people. And one last point, when Emmanuel was talking about like how he's traveling and how people are talking about the issues in the United States, I would like to share a vignette I had like a couple of years ago. When I was in Turkey, I was in my hairstylist, and that's a total cultural thing for us. We go every day. And you talk with your stylist about everything, politics, especially politics. So I was saying something like, oh, you know, it's really nice. I'm really happy in the United States because there is freedom of expression. You can say things and you don't worry about necessarily ending up in prison, because at the time in Turkey, there were, again, things were going on. Journalists still are in prison. So, and my stylist, who is a very, I mean, he doesn't travel and he's a very burly, like nationalist guy. He said that, well, it's easy for you to talk. You are white. Black people are killed every day on the streets of the United States. And there was this silence. I don't have an answer to that. So it was quite a slap. And I'm like, okay, so, I mean, that is the awareness, like you see, that person who I doubt follows day-to-day US politics, the dynamics of European alliances and stuff. But there is this image of the United States. We think that, oh, United States is, yes, great. But people follow what's going on. People follow these protests. People follow Black Lives Matter. And when you, like Emmanuel mentioned, when you bring up issues like human rights or democracy, you will be questioned not because of some questionable foreign policy activities in the past done by the United States, not only because of that, but also because of our current politics and the issues we are facing in the country. So I'll leave it here too and wait until the next question for the rest.
Yeah, no, thank you. I mean, who would have thought one question could have brought up such great discussion already, and we're only getting started. Before we go on to our next question, I am going to ask Emmanuel if you can turn your camera back on just so we can see your face as you talk, because the passion in your face when you talk is all part of it as well. So yeah, thank you. But we'll go ahead. We actually have our first question from Facebook user Amal. This seems like it's directed a little bit at you, Nukhet, but please, anyone feel free if you can answer. So here's the question. This election is very important in determining what is going to happen in the Middle East, especially in countries like Iraq, Syria, and Iran. Iraq is being in the middle of this Cold War between the U.S. and Iran. The first move was when the U.S. assassinated Soleimani. My apologies if I pronounced that wrong. What will happen next, in your opinion?
Well, and that's a great question. And what will happen next will depend on who will be the president, probably. And this is a really big question. And I mean, you can give probably a 3-hour lecture on this. So one of the implications of the Trump foreign policy was withdrawal from multiple world scenes, global scenes. So the kind of involved, controversial leadership, I'm not saying that it was all appreciated US involvement in different regions, but we do not see that anymore. I mean, we have got this withdrawal and sometimes like untimely withdrawal that left things open for other countries to step in and make certain conflicts proxy wars or proxy conflicts. So in that sense, US withdrawal turned Middle East scenes like Syria, Iraq, to bigger powers and the wars between those powers. And I really don't know how a Biden administration would reverse that trend, because it's a very, I mean, once you withdraw, it's very difficult to come back again with the same force. But in multiple settings in the Middle East, we have a tremendous Russian influence because of the decreased US presence and US influence. And we have seen, I mean, Turkey has been involved in Syria and Iraq. And also you have Iran, and that's the elephant in the room. In a Biden administration, we will probably see some level of Iran re-engagement, trying to bring Iran back to diplomatic course. As you folks know, like President Trump withdrew from the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2018. And then Qasem Soleimani was assassinated, and the Iranians said that, well, if this is the case, we are not abiding by the rules of this engagement. So this type of behavior played into the hands of hardliners in Iran, and it's Iranian people are really conflicted. I mean, they are in a really hard place. And the hardliners in Iran are becoming more vocal because of President Trump's unconditional policies towards Iran and this maximum pressure policy. So things are really complicated because Iran is right now trying to exert itself more forcefully in different regions and funds different organizations. And then you have got this relationship I just mentioned, Sam, between Saudi Arabia and US. So that relationship, the main goal of those relationships is to counter the Iranian influence. So in that geopolitical landscape, of course, you have countries like Syria and Iraq, which are trying to in Iraq, trying to recover from a very difficult past, and in Syria, things are still going on pretty seriously. There is no possibility of recovery if these big games are going on in these territories. And in the past, even if a limited US leadership was there, things could be moderated more easily. But right now, we don't know who to turn to bring an end to these dynamics. So in that sense, it is very complicated, and I'm not even going into the details of Arab-Israeli conflict. That's an entire different topic. But I mean, I am not very optimistic about the time frame it will take for a possible Biden administration even to reverse things in the Middle East. There was a significant level of damage done, and we will see if there can be any meaningful international presence there as well. And let's keep in mind that one of the implications of the Trump foreign policy was the withdrawal from international organizations and treaties. And any type of partnership. So President Trump prefers to take things like bilaterally instead of having multilateral coalitions, which also makes things slightly more challenging because these are not the kind of issues you can handle bilaterally really easily. So I have to say, like, I am cautiously pessimistic about the future of the region.
Thank you. That was a great question and a great answer to that. And, you know, if only we had 2 more hours for you to go into more detail on it.
I can imagine the people who are asking questions. I cannot believe she didn't mention this part or that part. But like, you have to pick.
That's true. Emmanuel, Mario, do you have anything to add to that? Like I said, I know maybe it was a little more tailored to Nukhet, but
Yeah, I think that Nukhet did a wonderful job in addressing the question. And one tiny thing that I will add is that the assassination of Soleimani actually was counterproductive, because during the period when he was assassinated, the regime in Iran was in a very difficult situation, because there were people protesting because some of the agreement was supposed to provide, economic relief for them, but the economic assistance that they received, the money that they received from the agreement, did not go to the population. It went to the people who are members of the regime. So there was a situation that could escalate in Iran, but when Soleimani was assassinated, that kind of provoked a situation where all the factions in Iran, they close ranks, because they realize that regardless of what is happening between Iran and the US, the United States government, the Trump administration, is not interested in any form of negotiation or agreement. Actually, the director of national security, not the John Bolton at that time, who was the national security advisor, his idea was more to have a war with Iran, to kind of bomb, etc. So that became counterproductive when you have a one-sided policy without any regard for what the outcomes would be. And the other thing that I will add is that, as Nukhet mentioned, the situation in the Middle East is very dire. And it's important for people in the United States to understand that when things like that are happening in the Middle East, there will be a future consequence. There are some implications for people in the United States. And this is what happened in 9/11. Until that period, people didn't know about it. But there are certain policies, sometimes at some point they backfire. And in some corners of the world, leaders, they don't play a short-term game. They play a long-term game, because they know that it's not like in some countries, like you have a king, he's there until he dies, or you have a queen who will be there forever. They know that you have a first term, a second term, and things can change. So there can be a wait-and-see game sometime to try to do certain things that may not be in the interest of people in this country, and that may not be in the interest of the national security of the United States.
Great, thank you. I say, Mario, I'm not sure if you have anything to add, but this next question seems a little more directed at you anyway. So we have another question from a Facebook user, Erin. She asks, what do other countries think about the U.S. response to COVID and the general idea of politicizing public health in general? Like I said, Mario, if you want to take that one away, and then both of you can also comment if you'd like.
Well, as we all know, the United States leads the world in number of cases, and the staggering amount of fatalities, both directly caused by infection and secondarily caused by infection, is just incredible. It is incredible in a country that has so many resources, that is so rich. I mean, there is no question about the fact that the United States is, has tremendous economic power, and the fact that politicizing and the response has been the primary tool is extremely troublesome, and it's something that puts also a bad example, sets a bad example for the rest of the world, because leaders that find themselves in trouble are now using the same type of techniques and casting doubts on things that should be pretty basic, like from the very beginning, the use of masks, the social distancing, the, limitation of gatherings and things like that, those are things that work. And they would work in every situation where there is a respiratory virus. That is just common sense. But the moment that you have a rhetoric of anti-science, of doubting and seeding doubt among the population and among the leaders, and giving these people, the tools to say, hey, the United States, they are, really advanced and they don't believe this. Why should we? So again, like we were saying before, at some point, the leadership of this country in terms of the response to COVID just crumbled. And right now there is a race for a vaccine. And this false idea, because it's really something that to me as a scientist is incredible, that we're going to have a vaccine ready by election day, has had a tremendous ripple effect in the world. I was invited to talk in a internet-based radio program with some rural community members in southern Ecuador. I mean, this is as far away as from mainstream as possible. And one of the questions I get is, well, now that we have a vaccine, what are you, Yeah, we don't have a vaccine. We are not going to have a vaccine because there is no time. And there is a lot there is a vacuum of leadership in that sense. And that extends, COVID is just the top, but all the anti-vax movement, the people that do not believe in vaccinations, have caused spikes of measles in the US, something that is so easily preventable. So from the standpoint of the public health, it has been really bad, and there is a lot of repair to be done in that sense, to recover the confidence on the US system and the confidence that the science that is produced in this country, which is marvelous, really is, believable. The United States and the National Institutes of Health is the largest funder in the world of health-related research. Yet the credibility due to all of these things is going down. Now, is that going to change right away with a change of government? Probably not. But at least we are not going to have a situation, if there is a Biden administration, we might not be in a situation where the National Institutes of Health is attacked in every iteration of the budget, because that also affects the research agenda and the possibilities for everybody in the world to continue doing that agenda. So it's a very complicated situation, and it's not an easy solution in any of these arenas. Now, if I may digress a little bit from the specific question, and touching something that I think is super important, and it's something that needs to be said, and is the situation in Venezuela. Venezuela is a mess. Venezuela is something that is a situation that is a humanitarian crisis that is that should be more known. And right now, they are coping with a tremendous COVID situation, right? And the government, Maduro government, is trying to cover it up. They don't want, scientists are a public enemy number one of the regime, right? And you have this, again, little play of words but no action. So there is a foreign policy that says, yes, we are going to be supporting the alternative president, or the other president, I guess, Juan Guaido. Yet nothing really happens, right? There is no action. There is only empty words in the size of the current and the side of the current administration. But on the other hand, if you look at Vice President Biden, has said very little about the issue, very little about Latin America at all, and that is something that is worrisome as well. And it could be that Vice President Biden might be just very cautious, not wanting to lose the vote of the Cuban diaspora in Florida, which is very important. But I think that Latin America is right next door, right, and is under the umbrella of the United States in many ways, but looking into this revival that can happen, and is happening as we see in Chile and with the protests there and in other places.
I would like to jump in and add to Mario's great points about the management, the challenges brought by the mismanagement of this pandemic. And I would like to bring back the international organization dimension. One of the things we have seen, like with many other issues, is the undermining of the international initiatives and organizations. These are not the kind of issues a country can manage by themselves anyways. I mean, even if you do it well, you need the cooperation of multiple countries, the exchange of scientific expertise, deferral to scientific expertise. So one challenge that was brought by, I shouldn't say brought by, but was made clear during this pandemic was how we are losing our credible partner and ally status in multiple organizations. And there are many issues that we cannot, even as the most powerful country in the world, cannot solve by ourselves. And I would not want to, I mean, we are at that point, I guess, in certain issues, but come to a point where we are like, well, we wish 50 years ago we had cooperated on these issues and we wouldn't come to this like really dire situation. So that is the part that keeps me awake at nights. Like it is, you cannot go alone. And one of the strengths of the United States in the past was this global leadership, was instilling confidence in international agreements, international organizations, leading the world, attracting immigration, attracting talent. Come and be an American, come and serve this country, and you are most welcome. So this was a Republican line, like when you look at like 1980s, 90s. So it is really fascinating from a political scientific view how some of these once conservative policies once welcome and furthered by conservative circles are now actually the liberal line. And you have something else. I wouldn't dare say it's conservatism. It's a very different type of, very nationalist, very intro-looking, and very personal type of leadership that is making everyone a bit wary about U.S. policies and leadership. So I think that's going to be a concern. And another concern, and I'll finish here, is the not just international organizations, the undermining of our internal domestic institutions as well. As a political science professor, if I had such a vibrant Twitter account, I would be in a lot of trouble. I know I would be getting calls from my dean or my university president, and Nukhet, this is you need to tidy things up. This is not okay. So. I mean, you cannot afford to have, any country, you cannot afford to have an angry or emotional leader. So things happen, and usually the way it happens is things are transferred to institutions, experts, intelligence experts, military experts, things are discussed, and the policy is shared. So we don't have that anymore. The policy is shared even before the experts know about this. So in that sense, like, even the closest circles to the president sometimes don't know what is next. And that can be a big liability for us when it comes to conflicts, when it comes to our relationships with allies and our management of key issues ranging from pandemics to climate change.
Great. Thank you so much. Yeah, all good points made. Emmanuel, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Yes, just some tiny things, because my two colleagues, Nukhet and Mario, have already touched on most of the points. But Mario touched on something that is very important, is how the management of the pandemic affects the perception of people about preventive behaviors that they could have had. And what I would like to say is that there is a reason that COVID-19 is called a global pandemic. It means that this is something that affects the globe. And like Nukhet mentioned earlier, one country cannot solve it. And it's important to note that when COVID-19 first, arrived in the US, the World Health Organization, they had tests. They offered them to the United States. The Trump administration refused them. They say, well, we're going to do our own. It turns out they tried to do one, it didn't work. So that kind of, that triggered a lot of, subsequent events that led to where we are now. And as Nukhet mentioned also, it's like global international cooperation is key, because isolationism cannot solve global issues. Actually, isolationism makes global issues worse. There is a template, a couple of years ago when there was the Ebola virus in Sierra Leone and Liberia. Cuban doctors and American doctors in the African continent collaborate together to, rend the virus. Cuban doctors and American doctors, they work side by side. That was during the Obama administration. So international cooperation is key. And also, if the pandemic started not in the United States, and it was in China, in South Africa, in Italy for a couple of months or a couple of weeks. But because of that lack of global collaboration, the leaders in the US, they didn't really learn anything, or at least anything meaningful, significance that could make a difference. Because most of the European countries, when they saw what was happening in Italy, they started to take measures. They learned from how, Italy deal with the issue. They learned from how South Korea deal with COVID-19. They learned from how Singapore deal with the virus. And although they are not completely out of the wood yet, but they do not pay the heavy price that we have paid so far, and that we will continue to pay in terms of people being sick, loss of lives. And there is a bigger issue that we'll probably 2 or 3 years from now, people will be talking about. When all is said and done, and assuming there is a vaccine, assuming that there is a control of the virus, there are going to be a huge mental health issues of people who lock down, stay in front of their computer for entire days, of impacts of the COVID virus itself on the mental health of individuals. So healthcare, mental health will become an even greater issue in the United States. And in that regard, public health policy is relevant, and it's on the ballot for that election, because it depends on who is elected president. You may or may not have a particular healthcare system that can take care of people who are in need for that.
No, you're exactly right when you say that, and it is a scary thing to think about. Thank you, because I think all of your points were, very thought out and informative, and it's something so relevant currently, being in the midst of this. And I remember thinking 7 months ago, just like 2 to 3 more weeks, and here we are. And it's a global pandemic. This is not something just happening in the United States, and so it's impacting everybody. It just seems to be impacting us, at this extent because of moves that leadership has taken. So we are actually getting ready to wrap things up, but we do have one more question from a Facebook user, and it is from Amal. So if it's the same person, you're asking great questions. So again, this is maybe directed a little bit more towards you, Nukhet, but as always, feel free to chime in, anybody. So here's the question. Do you agree that Israel, United Arab Emirates, peace agreement and with other Gulf countries is a move to win the election, and would these Gulf countries sign this agreement if it wasn't for Trump? Which means Gulf countries are very much pro-Trump. Why do you think this is happening now, and how this would be different, how this would change with a different president?
Well, Amal and I should meet sometime and discuss these things at length. So it was a quite interesting couple of weeks for sure. So it was quite the normalization between Israel and United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, the Abraham Accords. So it was a breakthrough, diplomatic breakthrough for Israel, for these countries. And I mean, in a way, of course, the administration wanted to own this as well. But obviously, it is not. It doesn't contribute necessarily to a bigger peace process in the Middle East. Many commentators noted that these normalization agreements without any conditions basically to the Palestinian cause under the truck. So it was controversial in that respect. But at the same time, let's not see this. Those of us who are following some of these news, this did not necessarily come as a total surprise, because things were already happening behind the scenes, right? I mean, I remember like from 9-10 years ago, talking to my Israeli colleagues and talking to my some of my friends in Saudi. I mean, these conversations behind the scenes with Saudis and Israelis have been happening. With the Gulf, it's happening because of the common threat perceptions, especially against Iran. So the timing is, yes, you have a more Trump administration would not come and say that, well, in order to do this, you need to take a step towards the peace process in general. So it just happened that these normalization initiatives came at this time. The question of whether more countries will join, I frankly think that they will. And some of them might be waiting for opportune moments. For example, Morocco. Morocco has mostly spoken against these normalization initiatives, but it has its own territorial questions that it might be interested in negotiating with the Trump administration, and might say that, look, I'm ready to talk to our Israeli friends here if you are ready to talk to me about my territorial claims in Northern Africa. Yes, Northern Africa. So it is, some of them are waiting for these deal movements, the transactional times. So under a Biden administration, those transactions might not go as smoothly. So some of these, the rest of the Gulf team, I think are hoping for the continuation of it, a second Trump administration, so that they can continue with these transactions and normalize with certain packages. So we will see what will happen. But again, it wasn't a total surprise. We all know the kind of friendly relations between Israel and Gulf countries. Saudis recently let Israelis use the airspace. So it is something will come from that angle at some point as well. And again, part of the game will also be to see how you can engage Iran when all these things are happening. Because if things don't go unmanaged, what I'm concerned about is we might be looking at a serious, very serious regional war if Iran at some point feels that things are existential and there is no way out other than going to a full-fledged war.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I don't know if Emmanuel or Mario have anything to add to that. I know she summed it up pretty easily in a few minutes there.
I don't want to add more, except to say that because the Trump administration is a very transactional administration, so a lot of countries around the world, they have learned how to deal with the Trump administration in a very transactional, sometimes short-term way. Some have tried giving him praises, and other government, they're trying to do business with his family so that they stay in his hotel, and others, they have their pet pig, and they said, if you give me this, I'll give you that, because they have some issues in their own countries that maybe that a Biden administration might call them on as well. They say, yes, how about that human rights abuse here? How about that issue of election that you do not organize, that is fraudulent, or other issues that the Trump administration totally turn their head the other way, literally. Yeah.
Right. Well, thank you all so much. As I say, I will open the floor for any brief additional comments in general that you'd like to make, since we'll go ahead and wrap this up. So, if there's anything that you want to say, any comments, feel free to briefly go on and say those. And if not, we'll go ahead and wrap up this conversation.
Well, perhaps I would like to end with how is that Nukhet put it, like cautious pessimism. No, I would like to do cautious optimism. I think that there is a lot of lessons that could be learned to what we have experienced in the last few years. I think the trajectory in a global scale is, as we see, has a negative balance. But I am hoping that the U.S. electorate is gonna be able to see beyond the easy push button issues and really both at the presidential level as well as the Congress and the Senate be able to move a little bit these relationships of power, so that we can see some real progress. So I, despite all of that we have discussed, remain cautiously optimistic.
I think we should end on that note. If
I agree. I don't think. I think that's something we should all go forward thinking about, is this idea. Well, thank you all again so much for your time tonight. This was a great conversation, extremely informative. I really hope that our viewers got the same thing that I did out of it, because I just feel like I walk away knowing so much more, and tonight especially more about, our relationships with other countries in the world, which I think is extremely important to know a bit about. So thank you again. And to our viewers, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you have any further questions, please send us a message or comment, and we will be sure to get you those answers from our experts. Again, thank you all so much. And last but not least, get out there and vote if you have not already, either before or on November 3rd. Please do that. Be cautiously optimistic, but no change will happen. And it's up to you to really go out there and be the change that you want to see, if you want to see it. So
that is as experts.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you again, and good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.